in the NFL as well, where the lingo is being used. The exact system, probably not, but the lingo is being used because the language is robust. It's very effective in helping receivers. Understanding the timing and spacing of your world would also help you. Football is about time and space. Offense wants more of it, defense wants none of it. All right, so the whole idea about defense is to reduce time and space. The whole joy of offense is to increase time and space. We want to give ourselves more time and more space. Defense says, no, we don't. So when Coach Maddox and I began this process, the problem we saw was we were using an old computer to try to do new things. It's like trying to fly an airplane today on, without computers. It'd be very difficult because of the nature of the units. So the point is I'm trying to make is that there needed to be a new way of going about it, and that's what we've discovered. And it took a while, but when we figured it out, it made a big difference in how players make decisions on the field. The biggest issue was answering that question, all right? Now, some of you have been exposed to this before. It's a little bit of a repeat for you, but for the new guys, what does it mean to say a receiver is open?
He has space.
Yeah, he has space. He's away from somebody that's covering. What else? What else is involved when you say a receiver is open?
No one's around him.
Yeah, but typically it's not buddy around him, it's about how close they are, right? So there's an idea of how much room he has between him and the defender.
When the wide receiver creates separation from him.
That's the word I'm looking for, separation. So when he separates,
I would say if you are able to the receiver where they would be.
you want to lead him, right? You want to throw the ball where the receiver's good at it. So conceptually, those are all good ideas. When I stand in a coach's clinic and I ask that same question, I get the same blank stares of many people. Nobody wants to be wrong because they know that the answer to that question is a difficult one. Coaches will draw plays all day long. They turn around and got to hand you the remote and say, okay, you decide. Because you're the one under pressure. So what they've got to do is try to simplify. What a lot of coaches end up doing in simplifying is they give you one, maybe two options to one side, and then you got to run for your life. Rather than giving you the tools to make decisions properly, they give you options that where you have to decide what the tools are. And the problem is they lack what's called a frame of reference. Okay, so if you're looking at something, it's hard to tell. I was watching a video this morning of SpaceX. I like to watch, innovation. I'm a big fan of creativity and innovation. And Elon Musk is like doing everything. The guy's a nut. I mean, let's just buy Twitter. You know what I mean? The guy's just crazy that way. Are you going to stay awake there, mister? Your body language is killing me. I want you to sit up for me, put your hands through your arm sleeves, and watch you join the rest of us. Yeah, I understand. That's what happens when your heart's not engaged. One of the things that happens is when you're in an environment is it's hard to tell how big the rocket locations are that they're building. They got one that looks pretty big, but the one, the mega bay they're building, is like, you can't even tell how big it is. There's no frame of reference. If you were to put 6-foot men next to it, you could tell it's huge. It's massive. If you stand next to a stadium, you see small people walking around, you can see how big it is, but without a frame of reference, you have no idea how large a stadium is. A fish, when you hang a fish off a hook, no idea until you put somebody big next to it. The whole idea of this is that the concept of open is that we don't really understand, without a frame of reference, when a guy is open. So let me give you an example. If you're going to throw a ball to a receiver running down the field, when is he open going vertical?
When he has separation.
When he has separation, right? Now, is it when he's past it?
No, it's when his shoulder hits his shoulder.
When he has room to create space. I love your enthusiasm.
Closes the
Never
cushion
lose
gap.
that. What's that?
Closes the cushion gap.
Yeah, you want to close the cushion gap by how much? Here it comes. Like, I don't know. If I keep asking the question, we're going to end up with a lot of different places. So let me give you an example. Stand up for me, Hutchinson. So we figured this part out too, all right? When I say we, Coach Doug Maddox, who's actually the one who's taken our form to where it is today, he and I started this conversation in 2007. And really it began with some basic principles, which is what you're going to learn today. The vast majority of what he's done is taking it into the stratosphere, but the reality is we have to determine something called a vertical value. In other words, how soon can I know when a receiver is open? That's kind of what open means. It's the anticipation of a wide receiver breaking into or owning outside space. Now that's a lot of words, please don't be freaked out. That's the coach's answer, okay? The R answer is going to be something more like R4, which is the idea of uncapped space, okay? That's what we're working for. We'll explain that in a minute. But with him in the way here, if I come off the line of scrimmage, forget who's involved here, just get the picture. If I come off and he starts backpedaling, just back up a little bit. By the time I hit my fourth step, if I'm within 4 yards of him and while he's still backpedaling, I'm going by. Okay, that's called a vertical value. 4 steps, 4 yards. All right, so if I'm within 4 yards of him, okay, so if he starts backpedaling, right now it's about 7 yards, right? But if I'm able to close that gap to within 4 yards by the time he hits the 4th step, I'm going by. Now what if I don't? He's covered. It's going to be capped because the receiver is able to rotate within that 4-yard barrier fast enough to get an arm bar on the receiver. He's not able to do that when I'm here. When I'm here, he's not going to be able to pivot fast enough to stay with me. So I'll get the separation you mentioned momentarily. Okay, maybe not permanently, but I'll get something initially. Because DBs are pretty fast; they can recover. The reality is they've got to rotate while you're running ahead full speed. That's a disadvantage. But once they turn, what do? They catch up. So the idea is that you want to get that ball to the receiver at the moment he separates. But we don't often know, so what we do is we hear things like, if he's even, he's leaving. That's not true. If he's even, he's covered. What DB doesn't run with a receiver down the field even? You know, it's kind of like, okay, he hasn't left yet. They're running even. I'm waiting for him to leave. He's not going by him. No, he's not. Because when he's even, he's covered. The idea is to make the decision long before it ever happens. So the frame of reference for us, because we figured this out, is that if by his 4th step, if he's not within 4 yards, come on. Or what is my other option? Back shoulder. I can back shoulder throw it. So in other words, he's coming here, I can go ahead and let the ball go and throw back shoulder and still be successful. It's the indefensible throw. Go to the back shoulder receiver, let him recover. All right? Thank you. All right, so that's an example of how a frame of reference can help us understand. That's a very limited one, but I'll show you more in a moment. It'll help you. When you're talking about the R4 system, it really is an entire offensive approach. It's kind of like the operating system that runs your phone. It's like Windows, okay, or Safari. It's not an application. It's an operating system. So you're not running an offense. It's an idea of how to run an offense. It's the way you do it. It's specifically designed for decision making, not necessarily just, how to draw a play. Well, it will help you draw a play up, but the reality is it helps you make decisions quicker. I saw Top Gun. I'm not going to give anything away. They're talking about it. I want to go so bad again. I'm looking forward to seeing it again. But in a fighter jet, the most important thing they want to do is make decisions faster than the other pilot. They call it the OODA loop. It's another acronym that says observe, orient, decide, act. In other words, I got to figure out where I am, orient my spacing where I am, make a decision and act before the other guy does. I got to make my loop smaller than the other guy. As soon as I do, I'm ahead of his loop. And when I do, I win every time. If you make your decision slower, you die. Especially in today's fighter tech stuff. R4 is a way to speed up your decision-making loop without having to change anything about what's going on. And it's true for receivers as well. Many times, coaches try to solve it like at the concept level, by giving you a simple defender key read, which is fine, but guys don't process like that. In other words, you stare at a guy, you already know what he's going to do, and then you come off. So let's say curl flat. Who are we going to read? The flat defender. Well, if I don't look at the flat defender, who are we going to read? I don't know. I just stare at the line, hope they block, and then I throw it to the curl. The problem is that concepts can only take you so far. Much like an iceberg, only 10% of the iceberg is visible. 90% of its mass is below the waterline. So the way you process is in your mind different than what coaches are drawing up. What we have to do is take advantage of what the defense is trying to take away. They're trying to take away, eliminate vertical threats. And how do they do that? That's the coverage you learned this morning. The 5 base coverages, which means how many guys are covering deep. That's all they're trying to do is take away deep coverage, all right? How many know there's an arrow in the FedEx logo? Yeah, you know something somebody else doesn't know. Somebody else goes, wait a minute, what, there's an arrow in the FedEx? What are you talking about? You feel like you're out, right? Right there is the arrow. That arrow was designed into the logo with the intent of drawing attention to forward-moving negative space and vision and all that sort of stuff. But the guy that created it did not tell anybody it was there. The CEO discovered it on his own, which is great. You want the #1 guy to determine it so it kind of looks good when you do it. And sure enough, you got an award for this and the whole bit. What I want to point out is when you see this logo and you're not aware of that arrow, all you see is letters, right? Well, that's how a lot of you read defense. Oh, that's a 50 front, or that's a 40 front, or that's even, that's off. Or that's cover 1, cover 2. You just see letters. What you got to do is see the arrow. Does that make sense? Whenever you look at the FedEx logo, what's the only thing you ever see? That freaking arrow, right? You're like, there it is. I see it. Okay, it goes like that. That's what your eyes are drawn to. They're drawn to the negative space. We need to be drawn to the negative space in defense. We got to be able to see where the space is, not just the people. Are you with me?
Yes,
So
sir.
the concept of doing that, we did this earlier. We went over this whole 8-step process. Depth, eyes, corner, leverage. Let's try something else, okay? Let's look at the field differently. There's 5 eligible receivers that can go vertical. We're not going to send them all vertical, but because there's 5 spaces that could be vertical used. So the defense has to take advantage of those. Right, be covering. There's a center line, which means they're going to put an extra man to a side. That's for play calling. Won't worry about that today. They're going to play techniques within those spaces that are going to deny, delay, and disrupt space. Receivers, when you come off the ball on the inside, they're going to wall you, carry you, collision you, do something to you, right? Outside, they're going to play cushion distance, like I talked about earlier. When we do that, we have this understanding that these things become what we call accelerators. Why are they accelerators? How many of you play defense? When you guys are taught how to play defense, it's not optional.